The mercenary ship trembled violently as it pierced the thick, toxic atmosphere of the Deathworld. Outside, a storm raged with relentless fury, whipping ash and debris into the air like a living beast. The captain, a seasoned warrior with years of battles behind him, stared out the cracked viewport at the desolate wasteland below. There was nothing but scorched earth and twisted wreckage stretching to the horizon. Yet, the silence carried a weight far heavier than the storm itself. They had come for one thing, a cache of rare technology rumored to be buried beneath this forsaken planet's surface. The pay was good, the risk considered acceptable. But no one had warned them about the true threat. Not the environmental hazards. Not the merciless storms. The stories whispered across the galaxy, half in fear, half in disbelief, were about the Deathworlder Special Forces. Elite warriors bred and forged in the harshest conditions imaginable. Soldiers who thrived where others perished. Soldiers who hunted mercenaries like themselves for sport. As the landing gear slammed into the cracked ground, the mercenaries scrambled out, weapons ready but nerves raw. The captain's voice cut through the static of their comms. "Stay sharp. We're not alone down here." His words hung in the air, but no one answered. They knew better than to speak loudly on a planet like this. The wind screamed through broken ruins as the crew moved cautiously. Every step kicked up dust that burned their lungs. Their scanners flickered erratically, failing to pick up anything solid. That was when the first sign appeared. Massive footprints, too large and deep to belong to any known species. The impressions were recent, too fresh to ignore. A quiet tension settled over the group. Eyes darted from shadow to shadow. Something watched them. Hours passed, and the mercenaries found what they came for, a half-buried bunker rumored to hold the technology. But the prize was cold comfort. The air thickened with unease, every instinct warning them they were being hunted. Then, through the swirling ash, figures emerged, clad in armor that seemed to grow from the very rock and dust beneath their feet. The Deathworlder Special Forces approached silently. Their movements were measured, almost effortless, as if they belonged to the planet itself. The mercenaries froze, weapons raised, but hands trembling. The Deathworlder's visors reflected no emotion, only cold calculation. One step forward, his voice low and steady. "You are far from home." The words carried more threat than 100 blaster shots. The mercenary commander met his gaze, refusing to show fear. "We're here for the tech. Move aside or get crushed." The Deathworlder's reply was a single, precise shot that disabled the mercenary's weapon without a sound. Sparks flew, and the gun clattered to the ground. The silence that followed was heavier than any explosion. "Leave this place," the Deathworlder said, "or be forgotten." The mercenaries exchanged uneasy looks. Pride warred with survival instincts. They had faced hostile worlds before, but nothing like this. These warriors were different, hardened by death itself. Tension spiraled. The mercenaries, knowing this confrontation, was only the beginning. The storm above continued to rage, echoing the battle that would soon unfold beneath the ash and ruin. The sun had barely risen when the mercenaries first spotted movement through the choking haze. At first, it was nothing more than a flicker, a shadow against the cracked, lifeless ground. But then one figure emerged, followed by another and another, until a squad of warriors stood before them. The Deathworlder Special Forces. Their armor was unlike anything the mercenaries had ever seen. It looked almost organic, scarred and battered, molded to fit their powerful frames. Every inch was designed for survival in this brutal environment. The helmets hid their faces, but the cold, calculating gleam of their visors was unmistakable. They moved with a terrifying grace, as if they were part of the very planet itself. The mercenaries instinctively raised their weapons, but an unspoken fear gripped their hands. These were not ordinary soldiers. These were predators. The lead Deathworlder stepped forward, his voice low and steady, cutting through the tense silence. "You have no business here." The mercenary captain met his gaze, steady despite the rising dread. "We're here for the technology. Stand down or face the consequences." The Deathworlder's response was a small, almost imperceptible smile beneath his visor. Then, without warning, a shot rang out. It was not a blast of fire or a hail of bullets. It was a single, precise discharge that struck the mercenary's weapon, disabling it instantly. Sparks flew, and the gun clattered to the ground. The mercenaries froze. The silence that followed was heavier than any explosion. "Leave," the Deathworlder repeated, voice like ice. "Or be forgotten." The mercenary leader's jaw tightened. He glanced at his team, seeing fear flicker in their eyes. Pride warred with survival instincts. They had faced danger before, but this was different. This was something primal, something deadly. Minutes stretched into an agonizing pause. The storm howled around them, but the real storm was the unspoken threat hanging in the air. The mercenaries knew this was no bluff. Suddenly, the Deathworlders moved as one. Their advance was slow but unstoppable. The mercenaries raised their weapons again, desperation sharpening their grip. Gunfire erupted, sharp and chaotic. The mercenaries tried to use their superior technology to overwhelm the Deathworlders, but the elite soldiers were relentless. They dodged and weaved through the hail of bullets, their armor absorbing hits that would have fallen mercenaries in moments. The battlefield became a deadly dance. Explosions lit the ash-filled air, casting long shadows that twisted and writhed. The Deathworlders fought not just with weapons, but with the planet itself, leading the mercenaries into pockets of toxic gas and jagged crevices hidden beneath the ash. One mercenary fell, his scream cut short by a silent strike. Another was dragged under the shifting earth, swallowed by the very ground they sought to conquer. Panic began to spread through the mercenary ranks. They had come seeking fortune, but found only death. The captain barked orders, trying to regroup, but the Deathworlders pressed their advantage. Their movements were precise, almost surgical. Every strike counted. Every enemy downed was a message. Amid the chaos, a mercenary caught a glimpse of the lead Deathworlder's eyes, cold, merciless, and unyielding. It was the look of a hunter who knew the planet better than any map or scanner. As the skirmish dragged on, the mercenaries' confidence crumbled. They realized they were outmatched, outgunned, and outsmarted. The Deathworlders were not just soldiers. They were an extension of the Death World itself. When the gunfire finally ceased, the mercenaries were few and broken. Those who remained struggled to catch their breath, haunted by the knowledge that survival here meant more than just firepower. It meant surrendering to the harsh reality of a world that refused to forgive. The Deathworlders stood silent, their presence a reminder of the unyielding force they embodied. The mercenaries had learned their lesson. The Death World was not a place to conquer. It was a place to fear. The air hung thick with smoke and dust as the mercenaries regrouped behind a battered wall of crumbled stone. Their breaths came heavy, eyes darting nervously across the ash-strewn battlefield. The Deathworlder Special Forces were not just soldiers. They were ghosts, moving silently through the chaos, their presence a constant shadow of death. The mercenary captain wiped blood from his brow and clenched his fists. His voice was low but firm over the comms. "Hold position. They're testing us, looking for a weakness." Around him, the team tried to steady their shaking hands. Every weapon was ready, but the silence between battles was worse than the fighting. It was a pressure, a suffocating weight that gnawed at their resolve. Then, from the swirling haze, the lead Deathworlder appeared again. He stepped into the light, his armor chipped but unyielding. The mercenary captain met his gaze. The warrior's visor reflected nothing but cold steel and an unspoken message. "We are the hunters here." "You are outmatched," the Deathworlder said quietly. "Surrender now, and you may live." The captain's jaw tightened. He scanned his dwindling squad. They were tired, beaten, but not broken. "We don't surrender," he growled. "Not here. Not now." A tense silence followed, broken only by the distant rumble of thunder and the crackle of smoldering debris. Then came a sharp, deliberate sound, a single shot, echoing through the barren landscape. The mercenaries flinched as their radios sputtered, static overwhelming their channels. The Deathworlder stepped forward, slowly. "You don't understand what this world demands." Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled. A hidden crevice opened near the mercenaries' position, revealing jagged rocks and swirling toxic fumes. The Deathworlders had used the planet itself as a weapon. The mercenaries scrambled, coughing and choking, their lungs burning as they tried to escape the poisonous gas. The Deathworlders closed in, relentless and precise. Each move was calculated, a brutal demonstration of survival honed over years of unimaginable hardship. One mercenary reached for a grenade, hoping to create a distraction, but the Deathworlders anticipated it. In a blur, one warrior disarmed the mercenary with a swift strike, the grenade rolling uselessly into the ash. Panic set in. The mercenaries realized their technology and tactics meant little here. The planet favored those who understood its brutal language. The captain shouted orders, trying to rally his team, but the tight grip of fear was breaking their discipline. The mercenaries' eyes betrayed their thoughts. This was no longer a mission. It was a fight for survival against an enemy born of death itself. Amid the chaos, a younger mercenary locked eyes with a Deathworlder. In that brief moment, he saw something deeper than hatred, an unshakable resolve, a cold acceptance of the harsh world that had shaped them. The mercenary raised his weapon, but his hands trembled. The shot missed. The Deathworlders pressed forward, their armor scraping against rock and ash. The mercenaries fell one by one, their screams swallowed by the merciless wind. The captain fought until the last moment, his mind racing. How had they been so blind? They had come to conquer a dead world, but instead, they had walked into a nightmare made flesh. As the final echo of gunfire faded, the Deathworlders stood victorious, not just because they were stronger, but because they were the embodiment of the planet's fury. The mercenaries who survived were left broken, their courage tested beyond measure. They carried with them a warning. Never underestimate the power of those who call death their home. The battle was over, but the legend of the Deathworlder Special Forces was only beginning. The mercenaries lay scattered, battered, and weary, the weight of their defeat pressing heavily on their shoulders. Yet, amidst the rubble and silence, the mercenary captain refused to surrender. His eyes burned with a stubborn fire. Survival was not just a hope, it was a necessity. The Deathworlders did not rush. They moved with the cold precision of hunters who understood patience. Each step they took seemed deliberate, almost reverent to the savage land that had forged them. The mercenaries watched, wary and exhausted, knowing any sudden move could spell the end. The captain gathered his remaining squad into a tight formation, his voice a low whisper. "We need to outthink them. They know this world better than we ever will, but they don't expect us to use it against them." The mercenaries prepared traps, using the jagged terrain to their advantage. Mines hidden beneath the ash, tripwires stretched tight among the ruins. Every corner held a promise of danger. But the Deathworlders were not easily fooled. They scanned the battlefield with unsettling calm, sidestepping traps as if the ground itself whispered warnings to them. Then the Deathworlders advanced. Bullets sliced through the ash-choked air, echoing across the barren plains. The mercenaries unleashed a coordinated attack, hoping to break the relentless advance. But the Deathworlders responded with brutal efficiency. Their armor absorbed hits that would have sent others sprawling. Their movements were fluid and precise, as if they anticipated every move before it happened. One mercenary tried to flank the enemy, moving silently through a narrow ravine. But a shadow detached itself from the rocks. A Deathworlder appeared, emerging like a ghost. The mercenary barely had time to react before a swift strike ended the chase. The mercenaries' morale wavered. Every victory was hard-won. Every loss felt like a wound deeper than the last. The captain's voice cut through the chaos, rallying his team. Hold the line. Use the terrain. We survive by our wits, not just firepower. But the Deathworlders seemed impervious to their tactics. They adapted swiftly, using the planet's deadly secrets against the mercenaries. In one moment, a sudden tremor cracked the ground beneath a group of mercenaries, swallowing them in a cloud of dust and debris. Elsewhere, a gust of toxic wind forced another squad to retreat, coughing and blinded. The mercenaries realized this was no ordinary battle. It was a test of endurance, a brutal trial by a world that would not yield. Hours dragged on, and the sun dipped low, casting long, eerie shadows. The mercenaries fought not just for survival, but for every precious breath in a place designed to kill. The Deathworlders pressed on, relentless as the planet storms. Amid the battle, a lone mercenary found himself face to face with a Deathworlder. Their weapons raised, eyes locked. For a heartbeat, time froze. The mercenary saw in his opponent's eyes the scars of countless battles, the burden of endless survival. The mercenary lowered his weapon slightly, understanding the unspoken truth. This was a fight neither wanted, but both were forced to endure. The Deathworlder stepped back, vanishing into the swirling ash like a phantom. The mercenary blinked, heart pounding, and rejoined the fray. As darkness fell, the mercenaries were fewer, their bodies bruised and spirits frayed. Yet they still fought, because surrender was not an option. Not yet. The Deathworlders stood victorious in every engagement, but they never pressed for total annihilation. Instead, they wore their silence like armor, a warning to any who might come seeking fortune in their world. The battle was far from over, but one thing was clear. On this death world, only the strongest, smartest, and most relentless would survive. And the Deathworlder Special Forces were the very definition of those words. The cold night pressed down on the battlefield, the storm having quieted for the moment, but leaving the air thick with tension and the scent of burning metal. The mercenary captain crouched behind a shattered wall, counting the dwindling survivors. They were ragged, exhausted, and their weapons were nearly spent. Yet his mind raced, not with fear, but with a stubborn resolve to turn the tide. He glanced at his squad, their faces pale but determined. "We're outmatched in strength, but we can outthink them," he whispered. "Tonight we fight smarter." The mercenaries moved with deliberate caution, avoiding open ground and sticking to the shadows cast by the crumbling ruins. The captain led them through a narrow ravine, where the planet's jagged rocks offered some protection. Here, the mercenaries could use guerrilla tactics, hit and run, traps and ambushes. It was their only chance. Ahead, the flicker of movement caught the captain's eye. The Deathworlders were relentless. They hunted like predators, silent and unyielding. The mercenaries froze, listening to the eerie silence that had fallen over the battlefield. Suddenly, The lead Deathworlder appeared atop a ridge, his armor gleaming faintly under the moonlight. His visor scanned the terrain, locking onto the mercenaries' position. Without hesitation, he signaled the others. The hunt was on. The mercenaries scattered, moving like shadows through the rocky terrain. They triggered hidden mines and tripwires, hoping to slow the Deathworlder's advance. Explosions ripped through the night, sending clouds of dust into the air. For a moment, it seemed the mercenaries might gain ground. But the Deathworlders adapted quickly. They moved through the chaos with uncanny precision, avoiding traps and closing the distance relentlessly. One by one, the mercenaries fell, struck down by swift, silent attacks, or caught in the deadly embrace of the planet's treacherous terrain. The captain found himself cornered near a collapsed bunker, his weapon jammed and his breath ragged. Across the rubble, a Deathworlder approached, steps steady and calm. The captain raised his gun, but his hands trembled. The Deathworlder stopped, visor reflecting the captain's weary eyes. Then, in a voice like cold steel, he spoke. "You fight bravely, but this world belongs to us." The captain's grip tightened around his weapon. "We came for a reason. We won't leave empty-handed." The Deathworlder's gaze hardened. "That reason will be your undoing." With a swift motion, the Deathworlder lunged. The captain barely dodged, rolling behind cover. The battle became a deadly dance, bullets and blades clashing in the dim light, every move charged with desperation. The mercenaries' squad heard the commotion and rushed to assist, but the Deathworlders had the advantage of the terrain and the element of surprise. One by one, the mercenaries were overwhelmed. As dawn approached, the captain found himself alone, surrounded by silence and the echo of distant thunder. He looked down at his bloodied hands and realized the brutal truth. They had underestimated the Deathworlders. They had come as conquerors and would leave as survivors if they left at all. The planet seemed to pulse around him, alive with a merciless will. The Deathworlder Special Forces were not just warriors. They were the embodiment of that will, fierce and unyielding. With grim determination, the captain vowed this was not the end. If the Deathworlders wanted war, they would get it. But next time, the mercenaries would be ready. Tonight, they survived. Tomorrow, they would fight to reclaim what was lost, and the Death World would remember their names. The pale light of dawn barely penetrated the swirling ash as the mercenary captain surveyed the desolate battlefield. The air was heavy with the scent of scorched metal and unspoken defeat. His squad was broken, scattered like embers in the cold wind. Yet, his mind burned with determination. Retreat was not an option. Not here, not now. He motioned to the survivors. "We regroup, we recover, and we strike back. But this time we fight on our terms." The mercenaries moved cautiously through the jagged ruins, each step measured and careful. The Death World was unforgiving, a place where one misstep could mean instant death. But the captain had learned something crucial in the battles past. The Deathworlders didn't just fight, they understood the planet's savage language. To survive, the mercenaries would need to learn it too. As they advanced, the captain examined the terrain, sharp rocks, hidden crevices, pockets of toxic gas. They set traps of their own, laying mines beneath layers of ash, and rigging explosive charges on unstable rock formations. Every trap was a gamble, but it was a gamble they had to take. Hours passed in tense silence, broken only by distant rumbles and the occasional crackle of comms. Then the Deathworlders appeared, not as a storm, but as a creeping shadow. Their armor blended seamlessly with a harsh environment, making them almost invisible until it was too late. The mercenaries held their breath, waiting for the first sign of attack. When it came, it was sudden and brutal. Explosions tore through the ash as the Deathworlders advanced, dodging the mercenaries' traps with uncanny skill. The mercenaries fired back, but their shots often met only air or thick armor. The battlefield became a deadly chessboard, each side anticipating the other's moves. One mercenary was caught in a collapsing fissure, pulled under by the planet's relentless grip. Another was struck down by a silent blade from a Deathworlder who appeared like a phantom from the smoke. The captain gritted his teeth and rallied his team. "Hold fast. Use the terrain. We're turning this fight." They pushed forward, forcing the Deathworlders to adjust their tactics. But the elite warriors were adaptable, shifting like shadows, cutting off escape routes, driving the mercenaries deeper into the wasteland. In a desperate bid, the captain led a small squad on a flanking maneuver, slipping through a narrow ravine to strike at the enemy's rear. For a moment, it seemed to work. They caught a Deathworlder off guard, disabling his weapon with a precise shot. But victory was fleeting. The rest of the Deathworlders closed in quickly, surrounding the mercenaries with ruthless efficiency. The battle became chaotic, blasts of fire and steel clashing beneath a sky darkened by smoke. The captain found himself face to face with the lead Deathworlder once again. Neither spoke. Their eyes locked behind their visors. Two warriors shaped by war, bound by the unforgiving land. Then the ground shook violently. A fissure opened, swallowing friend and foe alike. The captain barely leapt clear, his body aching but alive. As the dust settled, both sides paused, the raw power of the death world reminding them of its dominion. The mercenaries had survived, but barely. They were battered, bruised, and humbled. Yet in their eyes burned a new resolve, not just to survive, but to master the land that sought to destroy them. The Deathworlders melted back into the mist and ash, their presence a looming threat and a silent promise. This war was far from over. The mercenary captain gazed at the desolate horizon. Tomorrow they would fight again. But next time they would fight smarter, harder. They would become more than intruders. They would become a force the death world could not ignore. The battle for survival had only just begun. The mercenary captain lay under a tattered tarp, the cold biting into his bones. Around him, the remnants of his squad nursed their wounds, their faces marked by exhaustion and grim determination. The death world was silent for now, but they all knew it was only a breath between storms. His mind raced as he examined the data from their last encounter. The Deathworlder Special Forces were more than warriors. They were legends born from a planet that demanded perfection. Their armor was a second skin, their reflexes honed by endless battle and survival in a hostile world that would break lesser beings. The captain's eyes hardened. If his team was to survive, they couldn't rely on brute force alone. They needed to understand the death world's deadly embrace, to use its dangers as weapons against their relentless foes. They moved out at first light, weaving through jagged rock formations that cast long shadows over the ash-covered ground. Every step was measured, every breath held. The mercenaries had learned patience, the most valuable weapon on this unforgiving planet. Ahead, a narrow canyon appeared, its walls cracked and scarred by ancient tremors. The captain paused, sensing an opportunity. "We'll set an ambush here," he whispered. "The Deathworlders will come hunting. They always do." Hours passed as the mercenaries prepared their traps. Mines camouflaged beneath ash, tripwires strung tight across narrow passages, and explosive charges carefully placed on unstable rock ledges. They worked in silence, minds sharp despite fatigue. Then, the first signs of movement appeared, a flicker of metal glinting in the distant light. The Deathworlders approached, their advance slow and deliberate, like shadows blending into the harsh landscape. The mercenaries held their positions, weapons ready. The tension was palpable, The silence, a living thing pressing down on them. Suddenly, a flare shot into the sky, a signal from the mercenaries. The ambush was sprung. Explosions rocked the canyon as mines detonated, sending plumes of ash and debris into the air. The Deathworlders faltered but recovered swiftly, their armor absorbing the blasts. They advanced through the smoke with unyielding resolve. Gunfire erupted, sharp and chaotic. The mercenaries fought fiercely, their traps and tactics buying precious seconds. Yet the Deathworlders moved with terrifying precision, dodging and striking with lethal efficiency. The captain spotted the lead Deathworlder, his visor reflecting the fiery chaos. Their eyes met briefly, a clash of wills as ancient as the planet itself. The battle surged through the canyon, each side pushing to break the other. Rocks tumbled, weapons flared, and the ground trembled beneath the fury of combat. Amid the chaos, the captain found himself cornered. His squad was scattered, their strength fading. But he refused to yield. With a fierce cry, he charged, driving the Deathworlder back with sheer determination. It was a desperate gamble, a moment of raw will against a warrior born of death itself. The Deathworlder hesitated, then smiled beneath his visor, a grim acknowledgment of the captain's resolve. They clashed again, steel ringing against steel. But the mercenaries' advantage was fleeting. More Deathworlders poured into the canyon, their relentless advance threatening to overwhelm the ambush. The captain knew they had seconds before the tide turned. He signaled a retreat, painful but necessary. As the mercenaries withdrew under heavy fire, the death world seemed to close in around them. The land itself was a weapon, shaping the battle as much as any soldier's skill. They escaped the canyon, battered but alive, their spirits bruised but unbroken. The captain looked back once, eyes burning with fierce determination. This war was far from over. The death world might claim many, but it would never break their will. They would learn, adapt, and fight again. Because in a world built for death, survival was the greatest victory of all. The war-torn sky burned with the fiery hues of dawn as the mercenary captain led his battered squad across the jagged wasteland. Every step was heavy with the memories of fallen comrades and battles fought tooth and nail. But beneath the exhaustion, a fierce determination pulsed stronger than ever. This death world was no longer just a hostile landscape, it was their crucible, and they would emerge forged anew. The mercenaries moved with a purpose born from hard-earned experience. They knew the Deathworlders were watching, waiting, testing. The elite warriors of the planet were as relentless as the deadly terrain itself. But this time, the mercenaries would not be mere prey. They would become hunters. The captain paused atop a ridge and surveyed the battlefield below, a vast expanse of ruined outposts, smoking craters, and twisted metal. Somewhere within that chaos, the Deathworlders prepared to strike again. But the mercenaries had a secret weapon, understanding. They had learned to read the planet like a living map, to anticipate its deadly traps and use its harshness as a shield rather than a burden. Mines were set with deadly precision, ambush points hidden beneath layers of ash and shattered rock. Every element of the environment was weaponized. Suddenly, the Deathworlders emerged, ghost-like figures moving with terrifying grace, armor blending into the gray smoke. Their advance was silent but deadly. The mercenaries held their breath as the first shots rang out, tearing through the stillness. The battle erupted in a storm of fire and fury. Explosions shook the ground, sending shards of metal and stone into the air. Bullets flew, slicing through the heavy air. The mercenaries fought with every ounce of strength, matching the Deathworlders' speed and skill. The captain led a charge toward a key outpost, knowing that controlling it would turn the tide. They fought fiercely, exchanging blows in close quarters where technology and tactics clashed brutally. In the chaos, the captain locked eyes once more with the lead Deathworlder. This time, there was no hesitation, only the cold, unyielding resolve of two warriors bound by their unrelenting fight for survival. The captain shouted orders, rallying his team to press forward. Slowly, inch by inch, they reclaimed the ground. But the death world would not relent. A sudden tremor split the earth, swallowing a squad beneath jagged rocks. Toxic gas hissed from hidden vents, forcing another group to retreat in choking fits. The planet itself fought for its defenders, a deadly ally to the Deathworlders. Despite the losses, the mercenaries held fast. Their spirits burned brighter than ever before. Hours passed in brutal combat until the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the battered landscape. The mercenaries stood victorious, but not without cost. The field was littered with the fallen, silent testament to the savage fight. The captain surveyed the aftermath, his voice low but steady. We fought a death world and lived. We proved we can endure, adapt, and overcome. The Deathworlder warriors had vanished into the night, their legend intact but challenged. The mercenaries knew this war was far from over, but now they stood not as victims, but as equals. On this planet of death, humanity had carved a place for itself, marked not by surrender, but by fierce, unbreakable will. The death world had tested them, and they had answered. And they would continue to answer again and again until victory was theirs.